30 projections in 30 days going into the 2024 regular season for the New York Mets as we continue our month-long deep dive into the Mets 40-man roster. Today we have one of the most exciting young players on the Mets roster, Francisco Alvarez. As the Mets' highly anticipated and number one ranked prospect, Francisco Alvarez took the starting catcher job by the horns last season. With 25 home runs in his rookie year, Alvarez slashed .209, .284, .337 with a 97 weighted runs created plus in 423 plate appearances. Although the overall numbers were not great for Alvarez, the 21-year-old star gave the Mets a glimpse of what's to come, patching up a franchise graveyard that's been in flux for almost 20 years. Even though the contact rates can get better, Alvarez really showed solid plate discipline with above average chase rates and walking at an 8% clip. But the most impressive part of Alvarez's season was his defense, ranking top 10 in nearly every catcher defensive metric, also landing in the 95th percentile in framing and the 67th percentile in pop time to second base. The future is very bright for the 22-year-old Alvarez, who is set to be the Mets' starting catcher on opening day.
But we were told all throughout, his defense isn't great. He's at best a marginal defender. And he was, like you said, graded out to be one of the best defensive catchers in all of Major League Baseball at age 21. As well, we knew the power was there. We saw the power of over 25 homers, almost tying Johnny Bench's record, most rookies homer catchers. We said the graveyard has been so good that we had, we went through Anthony Recker and Omar Narvaez and all these bum catchers to have Francisco Alvarez here. And him being that catcher at 22 years old and being probably the power of protection for Pete Alonso, like it or not, which, shouldn't having to put that pressure on Francisco. But again, most likely going to be hitting higher in the lineup, no longer hitting ninth in an everyday lineup. And seeing more ABs, the book's at him. We'll see if he makes some adjustments, bring in more an all-around offensive game, not just the power. But at age 22, some guys don't get to the big leagues at 24, 25, and this guy's already legitimized himself as a fringe top 10 catcher in the game, and by the end of the year could solidify himself as a top 5 catcher in this game.
He did take the job, by the horns, whatever you want to call it, hitting those home runs, one away from Johnny Bench. And I think with Alvarez, we saw a lot of, hot stretches and cold stretches where when he hit a home run, a lot of times there were a lot of home runs in the days to come following it. He had just like those big hot stretches. There was some hot and cold. He doesn't get cheated on any swings. You know what I mean? So that's why his season was very much all or nothing, where it was a lot of those outcomes where it's like a home run or strikeout kind of thing. But I feel that, as he does, get older, get more experience, the game kind of slows down for him, because I felt that when the season first started, he was really just all over the place, swinging at everything, not working counts, looked lost at the plate. But
looked like a 21-year-old kid.
Yeah, exactly. But, he slowly was, kind of, ABs were getting a little better, and then the guy took off. He was also getting hits in big moments, late in games. He was just kind of doing much more than any of us could have projected. And doing all of that as a rookie, and especially the defense too, that being better than we all could have expected. So again, I expect maybe not more home runs necessarily, but I do expect a more complete player where it's like, okay, you see WRC plus come up, you see on-base percentage come up, all those other things come up. Maybe not so much home runs, because he just gets more like, he takes his walks a little more frequently, things like that, not chasing as much. I expect those things to improve, and then the defense to also take another improvement as well.
The hitting profile is very prestigious, I'd say, compared to a typical 22-year-old. And the thing about Alvarez is that he was able to go through those stretches of maybe there's a few strikeouts, a few whiffs, crazy swings or whatever, losing the bat or whatever. He was able to go through that because he does not chase as much. He does have a decent amount of pitch selection. The pitch recognition can be a little bit better, but it got better throughout the season. And that's the thing that I like about it, is that he is still giving you a quality AB. He's not there to just swing out of his shoes with his eyes closed. There was signs of this guy is a rookie. And then there was signs of this guy looks like a freaking veteran just carrying the team on his back in high leverage situations offensively and looking fantastic defensive. There's still things he needs to work on, which is great. I'm glad there's stuff to work on because that's how I know there's way more to come. And that's the good thing about Francisco Alvarez. He is so young. He's still learning. At this rate, he is going to be a great player in the major leagues for many, many years to come. So I want to let everybody know that projections are not predictions. They are benchmarks of the player's current specific percentile outcome based on predictive data and results. For my projections, I decided to use the 75th percentile outcome as compared to the usual player projection that are constructed at the 50th percentile. I personally just wanted to find a median between sustainability and upside. It also gives you a nice look as to who I am high on and who I am low on going into the 2024 season. As for Francisco Alvarez, 590 plate appearances, slashing 239, 310, 445, 21 home runs, 71 runs batted in, a 108 weighted runs created plus, with a 2.8 wins above replacement.
That's kind of what I was saying. I would take that. There's a little bit of a decrease in the home runs, but everything else goes up. It just becomes a more overall complete player, gets to play more. So, I think all those things make sense to me. The one thing that I do find interesting is he's a guy with RBIs batting 9. For him to still put up the 63, I feel like with him getting more opportunities higher in the lineup, like Andrew said, potentially even behind Alonso, directly behind Pete Alonso, I think you could see a pretty big RBI season from him. But other than that, everything else seems pretty good.
If you're getting a more well-rounded version of Francisco Alvarez, yeah, you'd love the power numbers to pop over 30. We'd all love that. We would prefer, 35 homers. But if you're getting a well-rounded hitter, again, WRC plus 108, still hitting 20 homers, I think you could push that to 25 and you're still getting more production. So if you're getting an all-around better version of what you saw last year, continuing to progress, then what happens next year? What kind of generational talent could be coming in the future if he continues to progress at the way that we hope he can be at age 24, 25, being one of the best catchers in baseball.
There is one obvious story that you do have to bring up with Francisco Alvarez, and that obviously being locking down a young player. And I think that we all have established that we are all for Francisco Alvarez. Let's just say from the mind of David Stearns here. If he were to put up this exact stat line right here, would that be worthy of a long-term extension? 8 years, 9 years, whatever it is, to lock him down, be your franchise catcher for possibly the next decade?
Yes and no to an extent. An extension that, if it's I'm not saying a team-friendly deal, but I'm not overpaying, going nuts with it. Like the project you said, 8 years, 80 million, like a $10 to $11 million extension. If he puts up that type of year, I think that's a fair value for it. Not much more than AAV-wise term we can care less about. If you want to do 8, 10, he's 22 years old. You pay him a 10-year deal. You still pay him till age 32. He can get another deal after that. But AAV-wise, if it's in the relative 10 to 13 at most, I think that can be worth it. And then, again, you're banking on the trend that he's going to get better every year. So you would see the progression. That would be like, okay, he took another step this year. Let's get him, locked up now. You've seen 2 full years of, or at least a year and a half more of service time. Okay, now let's get him locked up to a relatively, fair value.
As soon as the season was over, I felt that the extension should have happened. I think that you've seen a lot of teams do this with their young players. Before the Mets had called him up, Alvarez was right there as the best prospect in all of baseball. I mean, he's one of those guys that, once he came up, he didn't really surprise that he was this good because we kind of already knew this was going to happen. I think that, the earlier you could do the contract, the better, because like Andrew was saying, like team friendly and what have you, whatever it is, the amount you're going to get him for is cheaper now than it would be if you let him go to free agency. So I think that, trying to be proactive and not having another Pete Alonso situation, I think this would be a great opportunity for the Mets to just do the extension. Again, it's not going to have to be anything crazy because with the younger players, you tend to get better AAV regardless. And, with his age, you could also use that to your advantage. Like Carson said, the fact that this guy came up as a 21-year-old, or I think Andrew said, and not 25, that gives you a few extra years to play with contract-wise where you can kind of spread it out to help the AAV. And, by the time the contract's over, then all of a sudden, we talk about catchers once they get past 30, that's when they go downhill. You've already had 10 good years of him by the time that happens. So I think that you can kind of use both of those things to your advantage to still keep this guy, but also keep him at a reasonable cost by, getting it done early and using his age to your advantage of going bigger on years than you would on money.
Listen, I think it's still a wait and see, and that's kind of how it is with the entire roster, this entire organization as of going forward with 2024. But I think that, out of all of the young players we have out here, Alvarez is definitely the most possibility of a sure thing for the Mets. And I think that they do have to kind of look at it, because if he is a productive piece, if he does exceed these projections, which there's a strong possibility that he does, there could be a call to order for him to be extended before he gets to arbitration. And I think that that is something that they need to look at. Of course, they need to, evaluate that with Stearns having his first year in this organization. I think that we all feel the most confident about Francisco Alvarez out of all the prospects as of right now going into 2024. I think we're all expecting a big year, and we're all expecting him to be even better and continue to be even better as he continues to be the Mets starting catcher, only at 22 years old, with the potential to be a star in this game for years and years to come.